Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Mohammed, wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise and thanks belong to God, the Lord of the worlds. May peace and blessings be upon Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and all of God's prophets and messengers. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. May peace be upon you. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope all of you had a wonderful holiday and a little time off from work and a good time and a safe time with your families. Thank you for joining us today. A special thank you to our listeners on American Muslim 360. Today, we've got, I think, a program that is timely, interesting, fascinating, and it's going to be very educational, inshallah. We're going to be discussing today the history of Sapelo Island, which is, many of you may know, located off the coast of Georgia. And we're going to be talking about the community that was founded there by Bilal Mohammed, a freed black Muslim slave, over 100 years ago, well over 100 years ago. The community that he founded there, the community that still exists there, and what they're doing to fight for their economic rights, their land rights, and for other forms of justice in the modern world. We're also going to discuss the connection between Bilal Mohammed and Ahmaud Arbery, who we all know was murdered last year in Georgia, in Brunswick, Georgia. So we're going to cover a lot today, and we're going to cover with two people who probably know more about this issue than anyone else. I want to bring on now our two special guests, inshallah. Let's bring them on, please.
How you doing?
Excellent. Here we have Brother Reginald Hall, and we have Brother J.R. Grosvenor. These are two members of the family and two leaders of the family, of the community that is still existing on this historic island and are fighting for the rights of this family and the community that exists there. And they have been leading this fight with help from some excellent attorneys for years now. And so we're happy to have them here to educate us about the history of this island, the history of the community, what they're going through today, and why this matters to everyone, but in particular, the Black community, and in particular, the Muslim community. So Reginald and JR, thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's good to have you. So Reginald, let me start with you. I would like you to briefly just take a few minutes, 2 minutes or so, and just if you were in a high school history class and you only had a short amount of time to give students a brief history of the island and this community on the island, going back to how it was founded. Just give us a little bit of history for people who just may not be familiar, and then we'll jump forward in time and talk about modern times.
Brother Grosvenor, only thing going on is I got a lot of air coming in that phone, if you don't mind, sir.
Oh yeah, Mr. Grosvenor, mute your phone, and then
yes,
when it's your turn to speak, we'll have you unmute. Okay, go ahead, Reginald. We can hear you. Did we lose Reginald? Our producer, do we? Looks like we might have a problem with Reginald. All right, so while Reginald gets hooked back up, JR, let's go to you. Go ahead and unmute yourself, JR. We're going to give the first question to you. So, JR, tell us a bit about, number one, who you are. Introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us about yourself, the connection you have to the island community, and then let's talk a bit about the history of the island. Go ahead, please.
Is that still too much wind or?
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
My name is J.R. Grosvenor. I'm a member of the community. Born and raised. I am a great grandson of Bilal Muhammad Bell that was purchased from Turk and Caicos from Bell Plantation. Our family go back on the island about 13 generations. Sapelo is a place, I'll say, like no other place in the world. We still do a lot of fishing. We still do a lot of hunting. It's about 28 full-time residents that live in the community, and most all of us are family. At one point in time, we had about 400 or 500 people on the island after slavery, and sort of went went dwindling down because people had to leave the island to get jobs, and older people died off and different stuff like that.
Thank you, JR, for that little history. Reginald, welcome back. So JR just introduced himself briefly. I'll ask you to do the same, Reg. Introduce yourself, talk about your connection to the community, the family, Bilal and Mohammed, and then tell us a bit about the history of the island and the community there.
My connection is my father was born here, my grandparents, JR's family members, as we know it, we're all connected through Bilal Mohammed, 7 daughters. As Bilal Mohammed was brought to Sapelo, he was allowed to bring his 7 daughters, forced to leave his 12 sons. Those 7 daughters created 44 family units on this island. In terms of the legacy they left what we know as land ownership. Land ownership, even during days of enslavement, was being thought about based upon the notion of being freed people. Well, here on Sapelo, we know that the land amassed the economics that had the ability to feed the people. Farming, import, export of our produce, the eggs, whatever you can consider import, export, it was coming off this island. We have the records to show what the numbers were that the family members were making. In that reference point, as early as 1871, the ancestors closed with the deeds in their hands to purchase lands that were then registered in McIntosh County, Georgia, having the ability to collect their deeds. Well, let's fast forward from 1871, which, mind you, we're only talking about a few years after emancipation. Let's fast forward to R.J. Reynolds' time on the island, where we know the destruction was inevitable through the economic powers as he was bringing the presidents of the United States, the senators, the congressional leaders here to this island, not just in an effort of building whatever platform he was on, but also to let the people know we have an ability to crush you economically. And by doing so, then wanted to form a hunt camp. Well, this hunt camp idea was to be formed in our Raccoon Bluff area. Raccoon Bluff were these lands that we have the deeds in our hands at that time to say 702 acres now belong to us. Well, through the force of sheer brutality, Reynolds moved us off of those lands into Hog Hummock. Raccoon Bluff is high ground, waterfront property. Hog Hummock is just what it sounds like. This is where the hogs were raised, in the watery, muddy area. Fast forward now to his death in 1969, as the Reynolds wife, as the estate holder, claims to have sold our lands to the Department of Natural Resources or the state of Georgia. All of a sudden, our people are no longer on those lands, but today those lands are valued at over $1 billion. We're looking at a recovery process for land. The recovery says we can now build our museum. We can now build our cultural institute. We can now build our Bilal Mohammed Education Center. When you come to Sapelo, all you're coming to is an open air museum. So if it's 159 counties in the state of Georgia, each one of those counties have cities in them. Why are we not looking towards all the educational institutions in the state of Georgia, bringing these young folks not just to learn cultural education or have a cultural experience, but to understand what oppression is, or to understand how to be a farmer, or to understand aquaculture? Our agriculture, there is no culture without agriculture. You know the saying. So when we look at Mr. Grosvenor there, who has an organization that he started called blacklandmatters.org, this is in an effort for us to raise money for the lawyers, the surveyors, the title abstract, but more effort being placed as the onus for our family members to return to this island, create our own municipality, and govern with equity for ourselves. The problem has become our new neighbors have attempted to tax us off. Our new neighbors, along with the collaboration of county, have built outside of the county codes that were put in place that said you can build in cottage style industry, which would not force the removal of the indigenous population. In 2012, we won our lawsuit where the county attempted to raise our taxes without having done 17 years of evaluations and to a 2,000 to 3,000% increase. Now, that's going to tell a third grader something's going on, but it's going to tell us as adults there is a gentrification process to eradicate the Gullah people, JR, our family members, our children, and our unborn to never be on this island. That, mind you, is a private island with 17,650 acres of cultural research, cultural education, the experience that just Mr. Grosvenor on his second opportunity of economics is called Tour Sapelo. If you understand that Sapelo is a untouched land, no pesticides, no commercial insecticide. Mr. Grosvenor does tours that show outside people the opportunity for not just coming back to say we want to align with your freedom, because we don't want you to think we're on this phone looking for help. If you're here to help us, you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is bound with ours, your freedoms are bound with ours, then we start working together. The land of 702. Yes, sir.
Sorry, let me jump in there, Reginald, because I want to you highlighted something I think is really important, which is what Mr. Grosvenor is doing. You've noted a few organizations he's working with and leading. I want to turn to him briefly so he can tell us a bit about what the island is like right now, what the current status of things are, and if someone takes one of the tours or comes down there right now, what do they see? What's the experience on the island right now? What's life like for the families that are there right now? Tell us about what you're doing with your organizations, JR. And then, Reggie, we'll come back to you to go into more in depth about what you're discussing.
Okay, how's the background noise?
You're good. You're good. Go for it.
Black Land Matters. What we're fighting to do is recover some of the land that's in Raccoon Bluff. I tell people all the time, you know, I'm working to recover land on Sapelo first, but I mean, it's I got a lot bigger plan for that. You know, Black Land Matters, because we got Harris Neck, which is on the mainland. They lost a lot of land. You know, we got other people around Georgia that lost land. We got a lot of black people that lost land everywhere. You know, and my goal is to try to help people recover land. But what I've been doing so far is Raccoon Bluff, we've been surveying some of the lands that the state of Georgia's claiming that we know they got bogus claims for and stuff like that, to try to get some of that land back. So somebody text me and say my headset noisy. I'm gonna have to get out of the wind. I'm actually sitting in outside. Problem. But yeah, so that's the plan, you know, and if you were to come to Sapelo, we got a small community. Like I said, it's about 28 people. We got a lot of family members live in Atlanta, New York, different places like that. And I'll tell people all the time, we losing ground. When I was young, we had 150 people on the island. My dad said when he was young, they had about 200, 300 people on the island. And younger people got to move off to get jobs. Older people dying off. The ferry schedule don't align with people if they wanted to get a job on the mainland or Savannah. Our ferry schedule, the last ferry goes to the island at 5:30 in the evening. If you get a job in Savannah, you get off of work at 4:30, 5 o'clock, you get in one traffic jam, you miss the ferry. That's just another way I feel like the ferries schedule just another way to keep the community down, to force the people off of the island. You know. Yep.
So, JR, who controls
on,
Is it the county that controls the ferries? Is it the government, or is it some local private entity?
Georgia Department of Natural Resource, which is a state agency. But you asked me what would you see if you was to visit the island. We got an old sugar mill. We got a place called Chocolate Plantation. They got tabby ruins that slaves built by hand and actually used to live in. You can walk inside of them. We got an Indian shell ring that dates back to be over 4,000 years old. We got 7 miles of beach. You cannot see a house from the beach. You know, we got, which I ain't too proud of, but we got the Reynolds Mansion on the island. We got a lighthouse. A lot of people like visiting. And then we got Hog Hammock Community, one of the last intact Gullah communities in the world.
Fascinating. So these people can see these things right now if they take the tourism.
Oh yeah, you can see it. You can walk in it. You can touch it. Absolutely. And we got you got a place where you don't have crime. Your kids can walk down the road. You ain't got to worry about them being kidnapped. I tell people Sapelo. I tell people all the time. People say something about heaven. I ask her. I said, "Is Sapelo better? If heaven better than Sapelo, I'm ready to go."
It is. I promise you. Heaven is better than everything in this world, but that doesn't mean Sapelo is not nice too. Now, Reginald, let me take it back to you. So, tell us about Bilal Muhammad. We're going to talk more about the modern stuff, but tell us a little about the history of Bilal Muhammad, who he was, and what he did on the island, how he set all this in motion. Tell us a bit about the history of him.
Ancestor Bilal was educated. Let's start there. He came over as an educated man. In the writings of this social order that put a story out about us, they say that Thomas Spalding was the builder of Sapelo Island. This infrastructure is just not true. Bilal Muhammad and our enslaved ancestors dug the ditches that now overflow because of no maintenance. The ancestors built that plantation house in which Mr. Grosvenor spoke about. If you look at nothing else, as the tabby structure, we know Thomas Spalding didn't come up with tabby. That was brought from the continent with ancestor Bilal. And don't forget, there are a few other Bilals that were along this coast, and they were friends. They too, as Bilal Muhammad here on Sapelo, were able to come in with infrastructure that made the planter or the slaveholder understand that they would make them the riders, meaning the overseers for the enslaved as an enslaved, to then allow the infrastructure to be built. Thomas Spalding, there's another document coming out real soon by Richard Riley up in Savannah, where he's researched now for upwards of 15 to 17 years that refutes Thomas Spalding being any type of engineer. If you think about this island, the infrastructure that sits here now was developed, designed, and created through the enslaved and Bilal Muhammad, with all of their knowledge coming from the motherland.
That's fascinating, Reginald. And I want you to tell me this is accurate. So this is a biography of Bilal, very brief. And I want you to tell me, is this accurate? Because this is on this is what's being taught to students in school. This is a resource. So I think this is accurate, but let me read it for the benefit of our viewers, and you tell me if there's anything that needs to be corrected here. So Bilal Muhammad, born around 1770, passed away around 1857, was an enslaved man who lived on a plantation on Sapelo Island, Georgia. He was a Fula, originally from Timbo in the Muslim empire of Futa Dajlan in present-day Guinea. Bilal Muhammad and his wife Phoebe had 12 sons, whose fates are unknown, and 7 daughters, Binto, Charlotte, Fatima, Hester, Margaret, Medina, and Yoruba. Muhammad was purchased in the Caribbean around 1801 by the Georgia politician, I think you mentioned, Thomas Spalding, who owned a plantation on the island. In 1820, Bilal Muhammad handwrote a 13-page text in Arabic. That document is still stored at the University of Georgia. That is just a brief little snapshot of him. Is that accurate? Things missing from that? Tell us what you think.
Well, let's make sure we understand that it was present day Sierra Leone now.
Okay.
But if you look at those writings, that gets pretty close, as Dr. Bell was mentioned in the Bahamas on the Bell Plantation, where they called it seasoning slaves. Now imagine what I just said, like you season some meat to get ready for cooking. They over there seasoning slaves to get ready for enslavement here on Sapelo and throughout the coast. The daughters' names, go ahead, brother.
Go ahead. I thought you were finished.
No, I ain't finished. You go, please.
One thing he mentioned that was not true, that it was stored at the University of Georgia. The University of Georgia ended up getting it without the community's permission. So in my term, I don't know if it's good to say for the legal stuff, it was stolen by the University of Georgia.
I 100% concur with Mr. Grosvenor's assessment, because if you look at what the University of Georgia has done with the Risala, is what it's called, and some are considering the mother text of Islamic literature in writings as it shows in some of the research we've done. If you look at the Risala itself, that is a document that was created so he could spew as the ancestors some of the understandings that he was made to leave behind. He wasn't going to let it go. So he had to put it in this 13-page document that has traveled the world and has made that university, if not hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Well, have you ever applied any of that institutional money made off of our ancestors' document to this community or its people? No. The university been on this island since 1959 and had never had one educational house, open house for our people. That means there's no bridging the gap between community and university, which is a movement, and they refuse to even let Mr. Grosvenor use their restrooms. Please, Mr. Grosvenor, would you tell that?
No, and I know you remember that.
Yes, sir.
Tell us more.
And the University of Georgia is one of two of the main employees on the island, and nobody from the community works at the University of Georgia.
Why did they lock their restrooms down, sir?
Well, they had the restroom at the beach wasn't working one day, so I drove back to the university, which is right down the road, to use the restroom. And the only thing in there is a toilet, a sink, and a soda machine that you pay to get soda out in a little break room. White guy asked me, he said, "What you doing in there?" I said, "I sure ain't stealing the toilet. I'm using the bathroom." The next day, they put a key code lock on the door.
As we were attempting to use the university's internet, I have the emails. We don't talk about things of conjecture, Attorney Mitchell. We talk about factual information that we can produce to prove our language. As we were attempting to use the internet from the university one day, the guy approaches one of our staff as a young lady and tells her she's not allowed to use an open air internet at the university, and pretty abrasive. Then the next day they changed the code and locked it. I'm just showing you some of the impediments that are hindering our quality of life. First of all, you come to our lands, you kick us in our teeth, you don't even say hello to us, and then you leave with the money every day because you've steered the tourism away from the people, Mr. Grosvenor and other family members, but Mr. Grosvenor is the main tourism operator here on the island. You steer that from us to the state and to the university. We have some real problems.
So, Reginald, right now, so we're in the year 2021 in the Gregorian calendar. So it's been, almost 200 years or so since Bilal Mohammed founded this community. Tell us about what happened after slavery ended. This community is a very unique experience. My understanding is that The religious practice of the community is unique. It has some aspects of Islam and then Christianity melded together. And the community, obviously, as you all described, was pushed and pushed and pushed off its land. So now as we go from that to the present day, you've described some of the struggles that are happening. So you're in a struggle, number one, to make this island, to make sure this island is getting the proper resources so that people can go to and from. So people have proper utilities on the island. So people can actually live and function there if they want to do so. You're in a struggle to recover land that was taken from you. You still haven't gotten back. It looks like you won the fight over the tax issue. So Reginald, what are like maybe the 2 or 3 main fights that are going on right now that people should know about related to the community on the island?
Mr. Grosvenor, would you take that first?
He said one of the main fights that's on the island.
Yeah, like what are the main things y'all are fighting for right now? What's left to be resolved? It sounds like there's a lot, but you know, you've got this conflict with the UGA, you've got the issue with the local county and the not getting proper utilities, proper access. What are some of the main victories you need to win right now in order to preserve this community and build up this community?
Well, I'll say land and taxes. And this is the example of what kind of stuff that we face with taxes. You may, outside of your house, you may have a green trash can where you put your garbage in and they come dump it once a week, right?
Okay, right.
On Sapelo, we don't have that, but we get charged for that. They charge us for garbage pickup. They charge us a 911 tax. Now, Sapelo is a safe place, but if I call 911, I'll be waiting probably for about 3 or 4 hours before a police get to Sapelo.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. We had the lawsuit with the state that built the new dock on the island. Our dock wasn't handicap accessible. One of them on the mainland right now still not handicap accessible. If one of us to say, well, we're gonna buy our own ferry, and which I've thought about before, and create our own ferry systems where descendants can work on the mainland and come back, say at 9 o'clock at night. The state owns where they're claiming every piece of property around the edge of the island. So we can't build our own docks, you know? And one of our main fights right now, the county have a building code that's 1,400 heated square feet. This person right here, I'm not going to call anybody names. They built this house that's 3,000 square feet, but it's 1,400 heated, but the house is still. Then they go back later after they got their certificate from the county, and then they open these other rooms, or they cut the holes out the wall and put the ventilation in the rest of the room, and there you go. You got a 3,500 square feet right next to this lady little house that was built in the 30s or the 40s. That's 800 square feet. This house valued at 30, 40,000. This house right there beside it value almost at $1 million. Her tax is going to shoot up, and it's going to force her to have to sell her houses. So that's one of the main problems that we're having on the island right now.
So gentrification. It's gentrification, plain and simple. Go ahead, Reginald.
Well, what Mr. Grosvenor is speaking of, they've taken our zoning, building, and ordinance code, section 515. I explained it to you. Mr. Grosvenor just said 1,400 square feet, 48 inches high. Section 515 existed for many years until Mr. Grosvenor and I started making some noise about these housing forms. Now they've turned it to section 16.1. Section 16.1 now added the word that Mr. Grosvenor just said, heated. 1,400 heated. Well, as of April of this year, the county commission is attempting to raise that to 1,600. Now we're worried about that. In all of what we're talking about, You, sir, mentioned the word gentrification. This is on a level like I've never seen, and I've been in many states and many neighborhoods of marginalized people. I've watched gentrification next door just tear down a whole block. This is tearing down a culture. I don't want people to use the word gentrification and just think of land, taxes, and housing. This is separating our families. This is causing animosity between our families. We're under a post-traumatic stress disorder that you could never imagine through the divide and conquer tactic. We are looking to heal. We need to suture not just the wound, but we need to figure out how do you stop the bleeding. Just because you do a suture to a wound don't mean it won't bleed. How do you stop the bleeding? The way we know how to stop the bleeding, get off our lands, claiming them for yourselves, as the state of Georgia now claims 1.1 million acres of land as the government. Leave our little 3,000, 4,000 acres alone. Moreover, create a system that you have put in your own public policy that says we are here as the state on their website to preserve cultural, historic heritage designated sites. We are not a designated site. So for your listeners, we on Sapelo need a designation of historic reference points. That's how you get the funding. But what we have not mentioned yet, and I know you don't have long, you must understand that the state has stolen two of our other cemeteries that we know sit on this island. Mr. Grosvenor and I can go to the cemetery known as Behavior, but we can only go 2 or 3 generations back. You yourself have done the numbers, sir. You said that we're 200 plus years old. That tells us how many generations the cemeteries that we cannot go to the headstones, although we know where they are. We're looking for the possibilities of ground penetrating radar, the possibilities of LIDAR, but you're still dealing with an impoverished community, no economics, but what we have, we're utilizing to fight.
So last question to both of you. So if people want to help right now, just your average person, could average person or organizations, what can they do to help?
Mr. Grosvenor has a website, blacklandmatters.org.
We'll put that in the chat. A producer put that in the chat for us. blacklandmatters.org. Okay.
Along with that website, we're looking at help.org/SALT. That's a
say that again, Reginald.
That's help, HELP, second word org, ORG, third word INC.org/SALT, SALT. That stands for Sapelo Ancestral Land Trust. So that's a two-pronged approach. We've already created the land trust as a community-driven land trust that says when Mr. Grosvenor's Black Land Matters recovers these lands, we have an opportunity to now house these lands and have community descendant control of what happens from ground to vertical on those lands. But moreover, as SALT, Sapelo Ancestral Land Trust, is a nonprofit organization, through a nonprofit organization, has the ability to look at the tax burden relief. So remember, start from inception and think about the municipality. But until that point, let's control the lands. Let's get together a conceptual plan as we go in front of the government October 2022 as the sitting governor now, and have been offered an opportunity to develop a conceptual plan without a feasibility study that says, this is what we plan on doing with the lands in Hog Hummock that you claim to own. October 2022. We're looking for surveyors. We're looking for real estate professionals. We're looking for the litigation process of looking at title abstracts. You name it, we need it. We're looking for the equipment. Mr. Grosvenor right there just talked about a ferry. He's a 200-ton captain's license holder and can navigate these waters better than any man living in the Southeast coast, if you ask me. Now, he probably knows some elders that can make a left turn or a right turn that he may not have seen. But then we already have our captains. The main captain of State Ferry is one of our family members at 31 years old. So we're prepared now to cover our infrastructure with the machinery. Mr. Grosvenor is also a farmer. Mr. Grosvenor drives any machine and can operate any machine from excavator to backhoe. You name it, we're ready. We just need the alignment in the liberation of our people.
Well, look, I think this is something that people are becoming more aware of. I think it's something the Muslim community in particular is becoming more aware of. And so especially as COVID fades, I hope we can get people out there to take a look and see for themselves what's happening on the island and form that bond there. And also in the coming months, as you all continue to struggle on these issues, you know, where people can jump in, whether it's something as simple as signing a letter, making a donation, raising awareness, sharing something on social media, or lending some of the services you mentioned, real estate, legal, otherwise, that people will step up to do that. So we'll be continuing the conversation. This is the first step. Education is the first step towards liberation. And so thank you, Reginald, and thank you, JR, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and perspectives, and our regards to everyone on the island. May God guide and protect all of you. And we'll be in touch, inshallah, God willing. Thank you both.
Appreciate you, Attorney Mitchell, and we'll talk soon.
God willing. Thank you both. Thank you, JR. And thank you all for watching today's episode of CAIR on Air. We greatly appreciate it. As I promised, educational, fascinating, interesting. Inshallah, I hope we can continue the conversation with these gentlemen and see some progress on the many struggles they are dealing with to try to protect and uplift this historic community that was founded by Bilal Mohammed, a Black Muslim slave so long ago. Inshallah, we'll see you all next week for our follow-up episode. If you'd like to learn more about Sapelo Island, just check out those links in the chat. You can also literally just go to Google and look up the name Bilal Mohammed or Sapelo Island, and you'll find a lot of interesting information. And then if you would like to speak to Reginald or JR, reach out to us. You can email info@cair.com. That's info@cair.com. We're happy to connect you with Reginald or JR if you would like to work with them at all, inshallah. So thank you all so much. A pleasure. Hopefully we'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.